The next talk is going to be about some new infrared exploits or security. And here's major malfunction.
Thank you. Now, it's really nice to sit down. If I look like I'm getting too comfortable here, I've been traveling since 3 o'clock this morning, so if I look like I'm dozing off, someone come and throw something over me. My name's Major Malfunction. This talk is called Old School Hacking Infrared. And it's called Old School Hacking because it's a very old technology. Infrared's been around forever. And actually, when I talk to people about it, I get the comment back that, why are you looking at infrared? That's just so old school, nobody even uses it anymore. But actually, in practice, of course, most people do use it. And if I go into pretty much anywhere and get a show of hands, say, okay, well, who in the room has used an infrared remote control in the last week? So, yeah, everybody. So, who in the room hasn't used an infrared remote control in the last week? Okay. Electricity will come to your village soon, I'm sure. So my name's Major Malfunction. I'm a security professional by day. My real name is Adam Laurie. I'll be presenting again on Friday with some colleagues here about Bluetooth stuff. I became known as Major Malfunction in the early days of DEF CON, when people were actually losing their jobs for going to security conferences, which wasn't very cool, and I didn't want to lose my job, so I used my gaming handle, and it kind of stuck for years. It's only recently people have started to realize that Adam Laurie and Major Malfunction are the same person. But so it's not that I'm hiding behind the name, it's just a name that stuck. I've been involved in DEF CON since DC5, and I also ran one of the first internet pirate radio stations back in the 90s. Who was that? I'll throw something heavier back at you. Okay, so why did I start looking at infrared? Basically, because as I've said, it's all around us. Everyone still uses it. It's in TV, satellite remotes. It's used for master configuration of things, not just changing channels. Quite often, it's used for billing control. So if you're running a machine that uses an infrared control to turn it on and off, chances are it also uses it to set pricing and so on. So that can be interesting, particularly on vending machines. Public display signs, so those scrolling LEDs that you see in shops or on potentially even roads and in public places. Garage door openers, I think that's probably true here. Over in the States, when I say that, people look at me strangely. They've never really used infrared for garage door. They use RF. But I think over here in Europe, it's more common. And the thing that actually got me interested in the first place was car locking systems. I had an early BMW which had an infrared control, and I found that I could clone the close and open commands from my Palm Pilot and just open and close my car with my palm, which was pretty cool. That's a good trick. You're walking along, playing with your palm, and the door opens. And then I upgraded it, and it stopped working. And what I found with the new car was I could do it once, and then the next time I used the key, that code didn't work anymore. So I started to get curious about, well, what's the actual code that's being sent? They must be using some kind of rolling code or something, and I wanted to see, what the code was. So that's why I started looking at it. I called it murder. The subtext for this talk is Major Malfunctions Infrared Discovery Application. So I started actually writing a program to analyze the infrared codes. And it's the classic pun, so IRDA plus MM gives you murder. And that's because I was using the built-in IRDA port on my laptop to do the reading of the codes. And I got quite far down the road. I could actually read the codes, and I started to get to a point where I was trying to send them back. And I wrote this tool under BSD. And then I discovered Lurk, which only runs under Linux. And so I overcame my Linux bigotry and moved from FreeBSD to Linux, and now I've pretty much stuck on Linux because of these tools. So yeah, all you Linux people out there, it's not so bad after all. Still use BSD for servers, of course. So, yeah, why bother even playing with it? Well, I think infrared, it's been around forever, and it's unlikely to be replaced. It's very fit for use. It does its job very well. It's cheap. It's simple. The old rule, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, applies. I don't think new technologies that are coming along can compete. Things that, you know, people say, well, it'll get replaced with Bluetooth or whatever. So, you know, Bluetooth problems aside, which we'll talk about on Friday, it's not an appropriate technology for something like a TV. You know, if you're sitting in a room and you don't want the TV next door to be able to change accidentally because of something you do, infrared works very well. It's not going to get out of the room. It's not going to affect things around you, or at least that's the theory. But yeah, watch this space. So I don't think it will change. And because it's there, I think, you know, it's one of those things, if you're into security and you have a curious mind, which obviously you all do or you wouldn't be here, it's something to explore. And anything that's in any way security related is worth exploring. If there's anything that's controlled by something, then there's probably a security issue there. Somebody had to think about, how do I manage the security behind this system? And if you start looking at it, you find tiny little holes in it, and you pick away at those holes get bigger and bigger and bigger until you find actually they're great, gaping great wounds. And that was the case with this. You know, when I started playing with infrared, I found some tiny little anomalies, which have now, as you'll see, it fills an hour of discussion about all the bad all the interesting things you can do with it. And it's fun, all work and no play and all that. So. Okay, so it turns out that infrared is the absolute ultimate in security by obscurity. Because it's sending invisible rays that nobody can see, they've used really simple codes. And quite often, the security models behind it, when they implemented it, because nobody can see what's going on, they haven't even bothered to implement a sensible security structure. So they often have what I call an inverted security model, which is where the end user is controlling what the device can do. This is common in satellite systems, you know, decryption systems. They're broadcasting everything, and it's the receiving end that decides what you can and what you can't see. And that tends to be true with infrared-controlled stuff, that it's the receiving equipment that you now have control of that's actually deciding what you can see on the device. And hotel pay-per-view is a good example. We'll look at that one in detail. When we get onto the picture slides, can we turn these lights down a bit, because some of them don't look so good if you've got bright light on them. Okay, so to start with, I mentioned I was able to replay my car control. And I found that's also true of garage doors, toys like the RoboSapien, TV standards. They're so standard that, you know, people sell remotes that you can use to control multiple TVs and so on. And that can be useful if you're sitting in a sports bar and you want to piss everyone off around you, change the channel to the Disney channel or something. Yeah. And if you ever see a special remote, you'll know it because it'll look just like the one in your room, only it'll be red or something. So you want to clone that if you ever see one of those. So the tools you can use for cloning and replay attacks, one of the very first tools that came out, I think in the 80s, was like a Casio watch, which I thought had gone out of production, but we found some in Bangkok recently and bought a couple, and I've programmed them to do some of the hotel tricks. So that's quite cool. You walk around with your James Bond watch and do stuff to the TV. Apple Newton, guy called Lars Imisch, who might even be here, who's from the local scene, wrote some tools, again in the early 90s, I think, to do some infrared control stuff. And the standard for Palm, I mentioned the Palm a couple of times, there's a program on there called Omni Remote, and they've now got a standard which you can download from Pacific Neotech, and there are various tools for publishing your code libraries, and there's huge libraries online as well. Philips Pronto, again, is another standard, and there's now tools that will swap between the Pacific stuff and the Philips stuff. The Philips ones are really cool because they're typically just a flat screen device, and you program the buttons and the actual code, so you can make it look and feel however you want. They're quite pricey, though. And importantly, they're human readable form. So if you're going to play with these codes, you need to be able to see what the codes are. Okay, so here's the first example of a replay attack. This one I did at DEF CON a couple of years ago. I think it was DEF CON 12. There was a guy walking around. He'd bought one of these toys, and he'd played with it, and he'd obviously got bored with it, and he didn't want to carry it all the way home. So he was walking it up and down the lines, the queues of people waiting to go into talks. If anyone here who's been to DEF CON will know that you do a lot of queuing. Hopefully that'll all change this year. We have a much bigger venue. So he was walking up and down with this sticker on it saying, "Buy me." So I sat in line with it and started recording the codes. Can you see that all right? Do we need to get the lights down a bit? Is anyone there on the lights? Please. No. Hopefully someone will do something about it. So I sat there, recorded the codes, and then he would walk it up the line, and I would play the code that turned it around and walk it back again. So he'd walk it up the line, and I'd turn it around and walk it back again. So we played like that for a few minutes, and I don't think he managed to sell it, but I owned it. So. Similarly, there's a guy at work who has an infrared car locking system. So I put my receiver in this green car here, and when he left the night before, I recorded the lock code. So next day, when he goes to leave, he walks out to his car, and he opens his car, and I lock his car. And he opens his car, and I lock his car. And he opens his car, and I lock his car. And we played like that for a few minutes. So he got completely fed up and went back in the office to phone for a garage. I said, okay, yeah, I'll let you in now. But I couldn't actually steal the car because he also had an RF disabling system, but again, more about those later. Okay, so that's a simple replay attack. So if you can see the code, you can record it, you can play it back. But what if you can't see the actual code that you want? You can see a similar code, but not the one that controls that actual device. So I was curious if I could actually brute force these codes. If I can analyze what the code looks like, maybe I can send every possible code and actually brute force some kind of device. So again, I looked at garage door openers, because they're handy, TVs, and cars. And to do that, the brute force tools I used was Lurk. Now, Lurk is the Linux infrared control project. It's freely downloadable, open source, works under Linux only because it has some kernel hooks in it. Most importantly, I think it has a visualization tool. I find that really useful when you're looking at these things. Instead of just staring at meaningless hex numbers, you can actually see patterns of the data that you're looking at and see where the vulnerabilities may lie. Thank you. And that's, as you'll see later on, that becomes quite important. There's also a device called the IR Trans, which is very similar. It will also automatically learn codes, and it will produce human-readable files, which you can then mangle. That you can buy online from irtrans.de. Also solves some timing issues. When you're using the infrared port on a laptop, what you're actually doing is messing around with standard serial protocols and trying to emulate what an infrared is doing. With IR Trans, you're actually sending the codes in native mode, so they work on more complex systems. And that's what it looks like. It's just a little USB dongle. Okay, so here's the first example of a brute force attack. So this is my infrared garage door opener. And as you can see, it has inside a dip switch, which sets 8 possible switches to set the address of the garage door. So your garage door doesn't open next door's. Your opener doesn't open next door's garage, unless you sit